Shabbat Shalom, my friends, and may I be among the first to offer you best wishes on July 4th, American Independence Day, and July 1st, Canada Day. Happy Canada Day. We've already celebrated Yom Ha'atzmaut on April 19th, and then there was Australia Day back on January 26th. Principle: independence on any continent at any time is always worth celebrating. Okay, so there was this king of Moab. His name was Balak ben Zippor. Our Sedra, Numbers 22, 2 and following, is called by his name, Balak. Now, King Balak was very worried. He had had a sturdy military alliance with Og, king of Bashan, and Sihon, king of the Amorites. Og was a gigantic man whose bed was so large that he was thought to have been descended from an ancient race known as the Rephaim, mythical giants. Big guy. Balak had found himself quite secure because he had two such really powerful allies. But the two had just been militarily crushed by the Israelites in the 40th year of their desert wandering. And so Balak was justifiably terrified. Was he next on the Israelite hit list? Balak decided he had no choice but to go nuclear. Of course, in the ancient world, going nuclear didn't require the application of sophisticated technology, but rather the employing of someone who had a sterling reputation of being able to effectively curse an enemy. Words had great power then, have great power now. Though those curses could only avoid collateral damage by being very carefully phrased, they were still considered to be extremely effective. And the number one man in that day in cursing was Balaam. And for a proper fee, and that fee was very substantial, Torah tells us that those who are cursed by Balaam are really cursed, and those who are blessed by Balaam are really blessed. Balaam was called a seer, one who could foretell the future. Understandably, his presence in the Torah has been the subject of extended comments by renowned scholars down through the ages. How could a pagan also be a worshiper of Elohim? How is it possible for a pagan to foresee the fate of a person or a people? How could God speak intimately with a dangerous enemy of the people that was uniquely attached to the divine? How does that work? And how could a pagan somehow grasp the closeness of the Israelites and God and yet still be willing to consider, for a fee, an effort to curse them? So the rabbis twist and turn. Nehemiah Leibowitz charts some of the convolutions that were employed. Not to worry. Yeah, Balaam was a prophet, but a really low-level prophet. Besides, unlike all other prophets, he pursued God for a message. He chased God to get the message. In all other circumstances, God pursued the prophets and grabbed them and forced them to take the message. And besides, Balaam never really understood the message he received. If you can hear the fireworks out there, they're fireworks a little bit early. Balaam never understood the message he received. He was a little more than a ventriloquist dummy. God used Balaam, no more, no less. And look, Balaam tried to deceive God by setting up altars so that it might seem as if he were actually offering worthy sacrifices, but Balaam's actions were filled with artifice and no kavanah. I mean, they lacked all real intentionality. Balaam was a fake. Balaam was a fraud. Abravanel added that the only true power that Balaam had wasn't that he could actually make good things happen or bad things happen because of his words, but because he was so well respected, if other nations heard that he had cursed, for example, the Israelites, then those other nations would be emboldened to attack our people, and thus the curse would be fulfilled. Words could shape perceptions of reality. Back then and today, true then, true now. And then there is Balaam's talking donkey. You heard me correctly. The first iteration of Mr. Ed is found in the book of Numbers. Please take the time to read Numbers chapter 22, verses 21 to 35. It's a totally fascinating story. 22, 21 to 35. A full-blown fable in the style of Aesop in the midst of the 5 books of Moses. I love it. And by the way, that donkey isn't the first talking animal in the Torah. Which one was? That's right, the serpent in the story of creation in the Garden of Eden. More twists and turns by the rabbis. Don't worry. Balaam didn't really see a talking donkey. You see, that donkey's mouth was created by God in the last moments of the 6th day of creation, at the last instances of twilight before the first Shabbat. This was a miracle built into the very fabric of God's plan, not something that arose in response to Balaam's putative worthiness. That first twilight, by the way, was also the time when other important things happened. Miriam's well was created, and Noah's rainbow, and the manna, and even the tablets upon which the 10 Commandments were to be inscribed. It seemed that God had a really tight work schedule up to the very last instant before the first Shabbat began. So what's our takeaways here? First of all, this is an incredibly wonderful, fanciful story. Enjoy it for what it is. The next time you are mired in some of the details in Leviticus of sacrifices to be offered, remember that the story of Balaam awaits you in the middle of the book of Numbers. Next, some parts of Torah can be enjoyed without any need to drill deep. But if drill we must, note that God doesn't restrict divine communications just to the Israelites. The authors of the Torah had no difficulty in grasping that the one God who was universal, that God's concerns are, can I say this, greater than our people? That a universal God cannot be parochial? That God's will can be perceived and understood by peoples all across the globe? Don't tell anybody. We don't own the only channel to God. The content we received is ours, but there are many channels. The prophet Amos much later on would make that point extremely clear, and therefore we have no right nor any need to assert that we Jews possess all the truth. We can and should be learning from the many, not just from the few, and certainly not just from ourselves. And next, blessings can be found in the most unlikely of places. The words of Balaam found in our text have made their way into the very heart of Jewish literature, even into our liturgy, how we pray. Please take the time to read the Sedra carefully. You'll be swept away by some of the imagery. Do the words Matovu Ohalecha Yaakov Mishkanotecha Yisrael sound familiar to you? How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel? These words are Balaam's words. They come from our Sedra, and they are present in every morning service, in every shachari. They are the ecstatic words of a pagan prophet who seemed finally to understand that the great power of the Israelites not only came from the protection of God, but from the ties of family unity as well. Balaam, unfortunately, quickly slips off of this peak of inspiration when we are told he then created a situation in which the Israelites were seduced into sexual promiscuity. So the very person who sang the songs of Israel's family life conspired to corrode and vitiate the sanctity of that life. Balaam will go down in history as a rasha, as a really wicked guy or bad dude. A pagan prophet, a talking donkey, truths that rise above parochialism, and a celebration of the Jewish family as the root, the foundation, the anchor, the dynamic power of our people's survival. And a really great read. Have a wonderful Shabbat. By the way, this would be a terrific discussion to share with some others who might be interested in our weekly Torah conversation. Shabbat Shalom. Happy July 4th.